Mick Mars did not leave Mötley Crüe to the sound of farewell applause. He left amid a legal shockwave, serious accusations, and a lingering question that split the rock community in two. How could a co-founder, the man who shaped the band's sonic backbone for more than 4 decades, end up in court fighting to defend his own place? At 73, instead of speaking about memories, Mars speaks about rights, dignity, and the truth behind the stage. According to the lawsuit he filed, what audiences see in massive stadiums may not be entirely the same as what they believe is happening live. The band disputes this. The back-and-forth statements are no longer backstage matters, but an open confrontation between people who once called each other brothers. Behind this battle, it is not just about money. It is about ownership of the Mötley Crüe name, and about the question of who truly holds the musical soul of the band and who is being pushed out of a legacy they helped build. When the stage smoke clears and the lights go down, the story that remains is not about a rock star or scandal, but about a man who has been ill his entire life, still holding a guitar and refusing to disappear in silence. In late October 2022, Mick Mars announced that he would stop touring because his ankylosing spondylitis had progressed to a point where his body could no longer withstand the intensity of stadium stages. It was not a farewell to Mötley Crüe. He made it clear he remained a member, only no longer going on the road for tours stretching across multiple cities. In the public eye at that time, this was a story about health. A sad but understandable turn at the end of a journey spanning more than 4 decades under the lights. But a few months later, when his lawsuit was filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court in early April 2023, the frame of the story shifted entirely. In the legal documents, Mars presented arguments that cut directly into fans' trust in what is called live performance. According to his side, recent stadium shows used pre-prepared audio elements and digital support to maintain consistency on such a large scale. The complaint also stated that Vince Neil's vocals in some numbers did not arise entirely from the live moment on stage, and that Tommy Lee's drumming included assistance from pre-programmed elements. In that picture, Mars positioned himself on the opposite side. He viewed his guitar parts as played live, each note passing through a body that had undergone spinal surgery in 2004, with metal rods stabilizing his posture and chronic pain following him since his late teens. Those accusations were immediately disputed by the band through statements to the press in spring 2023. Their response did not focus on stage technology, but on Mars's condition itself. They argued that his performance ability had declined, that keeping up with the intensity of a modern show had become difficult, and that rehearsals were slowed down. Two streams of information collided in the public space, and the gap between them became the place where fans were drawn in. On rock forums, social media, and music analysis channels, debate stretched on for months. Some looked to the more than 40 years he stood behind the riffs of Kickstart My Heart and Girls, Girls, Girls to believe in that endurance. Others pointed out that the human body has limits, especially when illness has followed since youth. From a conflict over performance methods, the lawsuit expanded into the structure of rights and ownership. Mars argued that he had held a 25% share in the business entity tied to Mötley Crüe, an equal split among members. But after he announced he would stop touring, that share was reduced to around 5%, while he had signed no document transferring or relinquishing his rights. Along with the change in numbers came the sense that participation in key decisions concerning the Mötley Crüe brand, from tour operations and image exploitation to strategic direction, continued while his voice was narrowed. In the same filing, he also mentioned being asked to prove his performance ability, something that, for a musician with a chronic illness who had taken the stage for decades, it was not merely a professional assessment, but a matter touching personal dignity. As the dispute unfolded, partners in the entertainment industry followed each development closely. Changes in ownership and membership status could directly affect contracts, schedules, and the image attached to one of the major names in American rock. At the center of that swirl stood an artist, long accustomed to remaining behind the lights, now forced to face publicly the question of his place within the very musical legacy he helped build with his guitar and years of silent endurance on stage. When legal disputes put his name at the top of headlines in 2023, the timeline is forced to turn back decades to a boy born in 1951 under the name Robert Allen Deal. Long before the world knew Mick Mars as a guitar icon of glam metal. His childhood unfolded during years when America was still caught in social upheaval, not in an environment built to nurture artists, but in the heavy atmosphere of a working-class family where music was not seen as a career path, only as a sound drifting along the margins of daily life. By the late 1960s, while many American teenagers were swept into the rock explosion after the Beatles and Hendrix, Mars's body had already begun to betray him. Back pain and stiffness appeared in his teens, before he even understood where his life might be heading. The diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis arrived as a cold medical reality, not a dramatic shock, but a lifelong warning. While his peers pursued stable jobs, he adjusted how he stood, how he wore his guitar, how he rationed his energy, as if every rehearsal were a negotiation with his own body. Throughout the 1970s, he drifted through small bands in California, playing bars where the stage lights were weaker than the room's noise. He changed groups, cities, and hopes many times. There were no major contracts, no sudden leap forward, only long nights carrying his guitar home after playing for a few dozen people. It was this stretch, lasting nearly 2 decades before success arrived, that honed his guitar tone into something heavy, low, and slightly dark. Not chasing trends, not showing off technique, but built on feeling and endurance. By 1981, when his path crossed with Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, it was not the beginning of a young, promising guitarist, but the arrival of someone carrying a past of failure, illness, and unseen years. The darkness in his sound, the stubborn stillness of the way he stood on stage, and then the habit of working quietly behind the noise, all of it had taken shape long before the name Mötley Crüe began appearing on album covers or global tours. Those early days in Los Angeles in the early 1980s had no grand stage lights, no record deal guaranteeing a future. There were only overheated rehearsal rooms, the faint smell of burning strings when amplifiers were pushed past their limits, and sound bouncing off walls that had never been treated for acoustics. In that cramped space, each person carried a different drive. Nikki Sixx brought ambition, Tommy Lee brought explosive energy, and Mick Mars brought something heavier. The work habits of someone who had failed for too long to still believe in luck. As they assembled the first structures of songs that would appear on Too Fast for Love in 1981, Mars did not try to push to the front. He stood where the guitar could lock the entire mix together, holding the rhythm, holding the weight, like a steel frame placed between walls not yet finished. The album's initial independent release did not immediately turn the world upside down, but when it was re-released more widely in 1982, the band's image began to draw attention. Towering hair, bold clothing, defiant stares. Beneath that surface paint, Mars's guitar functioned like an undercurrent of force. Songs like Live Wire did not move forward on speed alone, but on riffs solid enough to keep everything from breaking apart. In an era when many young bands rushed to showcase technique and image, he played like a builder laying bricks one by one, unhurried, not chasing instant flash. By 1983, Shout at the Devil expanded everything. Thicker sound, darker imagery, tours stretching across multiple cities. In Looks That Kill, Mars's riff carried an almost physical weight, making the song something not just heard, but felt in the chest. This was the period when the band moved deeper into the Los Angeles nightlife, where partying and substances blended with relentless touring schedules. While the pace around him ran fast and sharp, Mars withdrew further into detail work. He could spend hours adjusting a guitar layer so it would not overpower the vocals, yet remain dense enough to support the entire song. That focus was not coldness, but his way of controlling the only world he truly trusted. Sound. In 1985, when Theater of Pain arrived, American rock began leaning more toward the mainstream, and the band had to step into a different emotional space. Home Sweet Home opened a softer, slower side, where the guitar could no longer roar, but had to know how to step back. In those quiet stretches, Mars's restraint became clear. He placed the guitar into the spaces between vocal lines, letting the sound move beneath the surface like an undercurrent. There were no showy gestures, no long solos to seize attention, only notes set in the right places, keeping the ballad from becoming a flat wall of sound. As stage lights grew brighter and tour schedules heavier, his body was already sending clearer signals of pain. Yet in the studio, he remained patient with each guitar layer, as if all the chaos outside were distant noise, not allowed to touch his work. The compressed energy from the previous years did not soften as the timeline slid into 1987. Girls, Girls, Girls arrived with the sounds of engines, wheels, and the city at night, a grittier, more street-level atmosphere than the glossy coating of earlier years. The songs carried rougher rhythms, more growling riffs, and tours followed tours with almost no space for the body to recover. The stages grew larger, the lighting system stronger, the heat under the lamps so intense that sweat barely dried between songs. For Mars, each night began to feel like a test. The back pain no longer came and went. It stayed, like a hot outline running along his spine. He did not tell that story into a microphone, did not turn it into an image for applause. Only those standing in the wings saw that after the guitar fell silent, his steps were heavier, at his back stiffer, yet the instrument was still held tight like a point of balance. When time rolled into 1989, Dr. Feelgood carried the band to a peak not many acts born from glam metal ever reached, #1 on the Billboard 200. That success didn't come from luck alone. It passed through tense recording hours, through restructuring songs until they reached a precision both radio and stage could accept. Kickstart My Heart exploded like an engine revved to the limit, but without Mars's guitar layer, the rest would slip off axis. His riffs were not flashy, did not try to seize the frame, but did the work of load-bearing steel, giving every vibration something to hold on to. On stage, during this era, with crowds so vast the lights formed a wall of brightness in front of him, he still stood slightly off to one side. Focused on the motion of his picking hand, on the pressure of each chord, as if the entire mass of sound needed to be fastened together every second. The early 1990s arrived with a completely different air. Seattle rose from the radio, grunge pulling rock aesthetics toward darker, less decorative ground. What had once been stage icons of the previous decade were now viewed with skepticism. The band faced pressure to change, experiment with sound, adjust the lineup, find a way not to be left behind. In that current, Mars did not chase every emerging trend. He did not strip away the sonic layer that had defined him since the 1970s. In the studio, amid tense discussions about new directions, he still set his guitar down the same way, thick, dark, heavy, like an anchor point in rough water. For him, change could swirl around, but the core sound could not be allowed to dissolve because it was the one thing that had kept him standing from small clubs to giant stages, and from anonymity to arenas, singing along in unison. By 2004, the story was no longer only about dull pain endured night after night. Spinal surgery came as a decision that had to arrive after years of the body sending warnings. Metal rods were placed to stabilize the structure of his spine, a medical solution that allowed him to stand upright, but also meant that from then on, every movement had to be calculated. The natural flexibility of youth was gone. In its place was a body that had to be set up each day, like an instrument tuned before playing. After the surgery, wearing a guitar, climbing stage steps, standing still for hours under hot lights, all became actions demanding clear awareness, no longer unconscious reflex. As history moved into the 2000s, reunion tours brought Mötley Crüe back to stages larger than ever, with lighting systems, LED screens, and audio technology far beyond the 1980s. Everything on stage grew more kinetic, explosive, revolving, while Mars's position barely changed. He stood steady in one place, moving little, not trying to attract cameras with exaggerated gestures or expressions. Amid the grand production, his task remained what it had been from the beginning: holding the structure of the music. The riffs coming from his hands were like steel beams hidden behind the glass walls of a modern building. The audience might not see them clearly, but without them, the entire structure would lose balance. Each show in this period became a chain of small but constant adjustments. How he placed his feet to reduce pressure on his back, and how he held his shoulders so the guitar would not pull his center of gravity offline, how he rationed strength across the set list. The pain did not disappear. It was only managed like a background tone that never fully switched off. But when the lights came up and the opening drums sounded, the audience did not see those calculations. They heard a guitar part still carrying the right weight, still landing in the right places, still doing the work of pulling each song through its peaks. On a stage increasingly dependent on technology and motion, he existed as a fixed point, where the music was held together by the endurance of a body that had learned to live within its own limits. Amid disputes over stages, studios, and legal battles, his private life moved to an entirely different rhythm. Fewer lights, more fractures, and always the sense of a man who never truly lived within the normal cadence of family life. He married for the first time when he was very young, before the name Mick Mars existed on the map of rock music. That marriage took place in the early 1970s, when he was still a drifting musician, playing in small bands and surviving on temporary jobs. They had 2 children together, but family life was quickly stretched between the dream of music and the realities of making ends meet. Constant travel, unstable income, a mind more often turned toward a guitar than a home. All of it wore the relationship down before he came close to any success. It was not the breakup of famous people, but the quiet dissolution of 2 adults forced to grow up too fast in a life too tight to hold them. When Mötley Crüe exploded in the 1980s, fame did not bring stability to his emotional life. He entered new relationships during the band's peak years, amid relentless touring and an environment where everything moved fast, hard, and without pause. The marriages that followed came and went in a context where music always held the central place. The women who entered his life often had to live beside a man bound tightly to his guitar, carrying constant physical pain and an emotional withdrawal that grew more pronounced over time. He was not the kind of figure for loud tabloid love stories. His distance came from living half inside music, half inside an inner space few others could reach. Over the years, while other band members frequently appeared in sensational stories about their private lives, he nearly disappeared from the media surface when it came to family. It was not that his life lacked cracks, but that he did not turn them into part of his public image. His children grew up largely outside the lights. Within the distance, his profession unintentionally created. For a man who spent most of his life on tour or in studios, the idea of home was always temporary. As age advanced and his body forced him to slow down, his private life gradually narrowed into quieter spaces. The endless chains of tours faded, and the rhythm of family had more room to exist, even if it arrived after many years already lost. In his world, love and marriage were never fairy tales running parallel to rock glory, and they were fragments of life passing through a man always standing between two poles. On one side, music he could not release. On the other, relationships that always had to share him with the stage. Mick Mars's legacy does not lie in the moments he stood under the lights, or the times his name appeared in headlines, but in the sound that quietly shaped part of the identity of 1980s rock. When people talk about Mötley Crüe, the image usually comes first. Flaming stages, extreme lifestyles, an era when rock was tied to spectacle. Beneath that surface, however, Mars's guitar was the element that kept everything from collapsing into chaos. His heavy, low-leaning riffs, tending to pull downward rather than soar, created balance between image and sound, between noise and structure. His influence spread not through declarations, but through a playing style later guitarists absorbed, placing weight on riffs, letting chords carry force instead of merely supporting solos. In many hard rock and metal bands that followed, the approach of building songs on solid guitar frameworks, repetitive yet never dull, can be traced back to the structures he helped shape in the early 1980s. He did not represent the school of flashy technical display, but of technique hidden inside feel, groove, and weight. The kind that makes listeners feel a song in their bodies, not just hear it with their ears. Another part of that legacy comes from the way he existed within the industry itself. Over decades, while many peers were swallowed by rock's fast pace, he maintained a certain distance from the glare, focusing on the craft. And the image of a musician with a chronic illness taking the stage night after night, not turning endurance into a slogan but quietly fulfilling his role, leaves a different message about perseverance in music. Not endurance to be praised, but endurance so the sound does not fall apart. When he entered his solo phase, his impact shifted to another level, proving that sonic identity does not depend entirely on a collective. In his 70s, still producing guitar parts with weight, still being analyzed and discussed within the rock community, he shows that his legacy is not locked inside nostalgia. It continues to live in how others listen, learn, and build their own sound, where one well-placed riff can say more than pages of words. Not every artist leaves the stage to applause. Some depart in silence, leaving behind something heavier than noise, sound that continues to live without them standing there. Mick Mars was never one to claim the center of the frame. He existed in the dimmest space, where music is held together by discipline, by endurance, by doing one's part over decades, even as the body protested. In an era when image often outweighs sound, his story runs the other way. Few words, few gestures, but every note placed with weight. Not the kind of legacy built on explosive moments, but on unbroken persistence. Something only those who truly listen will recognize. Do you see Mick Mars as the guitarist standing behind the band, or as the man who quietly held the structure of an entire era's sound together? Share your thoughts below. Hit like if you believe the quiet artists leave the deepest marks, and subscribe to keep exploring the people behind the lights that not everyone sees.